Picture this. The night before the 2027 general elections, a voice echoes across River State. I will not allow myself to be buried politically. That line came from Nyesom Wike, former governor and now FCT minister, and it sent a chill through the political landscape. It's a moment that feels like the opening of a thriller, but the stakes are real and national.
Wow, Alex, that's a powerful hook. It's like watching a chess grandmaster announce his next move before the board is even set. Tonight, we're diving deep into what that statement really means for democracy, power, and survival in Nigeria's political arena.
In this episode, you'll learn how self-preservation can morph into political intimidation, the historical patterns of power brokering in the Niger Delta, and the real implications for the 2027 elections. We'll break down the rhetoric, the alliances, and the hidden forces that shape voter choice.
Exactly. And we'll explore three subtopics. First, the legacy of political burial in Nigerian history. Second, the strategic calculus behind Wike's alliances with Tinubu and opposition to Fubara. And third, the ethical line between leadership and self-interest. By the end, you'll have a framework to evaluate any political promise of survival.
But here's what's really interesting. The same language that once protected politicians can now be weaponized against the electorate. We'll see how that shift is happening right now and why it matters more than any single election.
So stay with us, listeners. Grab a notebook, because the ideas we unpack will challenge the way you think about power, survival, and who really decides the future of Nigeria.
Let's start with the concept of political burial. Historically, Nigerian politicians have used intimidation to silence rivals. Think of the 1990s military coups and the subsequent civilian purges. The phrase itself evokes a grave, a finality that goes beyond losing an election. What do you think, Sarah? Does this language still hold power today?
Absolutely, Alex. When Wike says he won't be buried, he's tapping into a collective memory of fear. It's not just a personal threat. It signals to anyone considering dissent that the cost could be political oblivion. And that's where it gets fascinating, because the fear itself becomes a tool of governance.
Now consider his alignment with Tinubu. On the surface, it's a strategic partnership to secure votes, but underneath lies a network of patronage that dates back to the PDP's dominance in the early 2000s. By backing Tinubu, Wike is essentially buying a seat at the national power table, ensuring his own survival beyond River State.
That's a sharp observation, Alex. Yet the flip side is his opposition to Fubara's second term. By publicly undermining a former ally, he's sending a message. Loyalty is conditional, and any deviation could trigger a political burial. It's a classic divide-and-conquer play, but with voters caught in the middle.
What most people don't realize is that this isn't just about personal vendettas. The underlying economics of political survival involve control over oil revenues, federal allocations, and even local patronage networks. When a minister like Wike manipulates these levers, the ripple effects touch every community in the Niger Delta.
Exactly. And here's where it gets even more intriguing. The electorate's perception of these power plays is shaped by media narratives. State-owned outlets often frame such statements as bold leadership, while independent journalists call them intimidation. The battle for the narrative is as crucial as the battle for votes.
Let's dig into the ethical dimension. If a leader says, "Support my interests or I will erase you," is that still leadership? From a political theory standpoint, and leadership implies service, not self-preservation at the expense of democratic norms. This raises a fundamental question about legitimacy.
That's a great point, Alex. And it leads to a moral crossroads. When power brokers decide who gets to run, they effectively usurp the voter's mandate. It's a form of soft authoritarianism that can erode trust in institutions faster than any overt coup.
But the real game changer is the role of defection. Fubara's switch to another party was portrayed as betrayal by Wike. Yet defection can also be a democratic expression of dissent. The paradox is that labeling defection as treason justifies political burial, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy.
And that's just the beginning, Alex. If we accept defection as treason, we close the door on healthy political competition. The danger is that future candidates might self-censor, fearing that any deviation could mean being buried before they even get a chance to campaign.
Consider the statistical side. A 2023 study by the Nigerian Institute of Governance found that 68% of voters believe elite interference undermines fair elections. That figure jumps to 82% in the Niger Delta, where power brokers have historically held sway over oil contracts and local development funds.
Wow, those numbers are eye-opening. They illustrate that the perception of elite control isn't just a rumor, it's a measurable reality. And when people feel their vote is a pawn in a larger game, voter apathy can skyrocket, which benefits exactly the kind of self-preservation Wyke is championing.
Here's a case study that puts a human face on the issue. In Twemumin, a local councillor in Port Harcourt publicly refused to endorse Wyke's chosen candidate and was subsequently denied access to state-funded projects. Within months, his constituency saw a sharp decline in infrastructure development, a clear signal of retaliation.
That story is chilling, Alex, and it shows how political burial can manifest as economic starvation. When resources are weaponized, the line between political strategy and human rights abuse blurs. It forces us to ask, at what point does self-preservation become oppression?
And that's where the constitutional angle enters. The 1999 Nigerian Constitution guarantees freedom of association, yet political burial tactics effectively nullify that right. Legal scholars argue that such practices could be challenged under international human rights law, but enforcement remains weak.
Exactly, Alex. The gap between law and practice is wide, and that gap is where power brokers thrive. If the judiciary remains reluctant to intervene, the only check left is civil society, which, as we know, is increasingly constrained by restrictive NGOs' laws.
So looking ahead to 2027, what are the possible scenarios? 1. Wyke's strategy consolidates power, marginalizing dissenting voices and ensuring his allies dominate the ballot. 2. A backlash emerges, with voters mobilizing against perceived burial tactics, potentially reshaping the political map.
I'd add a third scenario, a hybrid outcome where elite negotiations lead to a power-sharing agreement, but only after significant public pressure. History shows that when citizens organize, think of the #End SARS protests, elite tactics can be forced to adapt.
What's particularly interesting is the role of youth voters. According to a 2024 poll, 71% of Nigerians aged 18 to 35 say they are fed up with political godfathers. Their growing electoral weight could tip the balance, turning intimidation into a liability for anyone who relies on it.
That's a powerful statistic, Alex. If the youth truly reject burial politics, we could see a new generation of leaders who prioritize transparency over survival. It would be a seismic shift from the old guard's playbook.
But let's not overlook the economic incentive. Control over oil revenues still fuels much of the power bargaining. Any disruption to that flow, whether through policy reform or activist pressure, could destabilize the entire arrangement Wyke has built.
And that brings us back to the core question. Who really decides 2027? Is it the entrenched elites protecting their oil-derived wealth, or is it an awakened electorate demanding accountability? The answer will likely be a blend of both, with the tension shaping the outcome.
Before we wrap this segment, consider this final thought. Political burial may secure short-term survival, but it erodes the very foundation of democratic legitimacy. In the long run, that erosion could be the undoing of any power structure built on fear.
And that's the paradox, Alex. By trying to avoid being buried, leaders may actually dig their own graves. Listeners, think about how this dynamic plays out in your own community and what you can do to keep the conversation alive.
To sum up, we've unpacked the historical roots of political burial, examined Wyke's strategic alliances, and explored the ethical and constitutional implications of self-preservation at the expense of democracy. The data and stories we shared paint a stark picture of power in Nigeria today.
Exactly, Alex. And remember, the real power lies not just with the politicians on the stage, but with each voter who decides whether to accept or reject intimidation. Your voice can shift the balance.
If you found this discussion thought-provoking, please share it with friends, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Your engagement helps amplify the conversation beyond these microphones.
And stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll dive into the role of social media influencers in shaping electoral outcomes. Another layer of power you won't want to miss.
Thanks for listening and keep questioning who really decides the future. Until next time, stay informed and stay engaged.
Goodbye, everyone. Keep the debate alive in your own circles.